Howdy doody, buckaroonies. Here are 5 facts about bananas. Bananas are actually considered a berry. Banana peels can be used to alleviate itching with things like poison ivy or bug bites. Bananas float in water. Humans share about 50% of our DNA with bananas. And there is a banana museum in California that is home to over 17,000 banana-related items. On a completely unrelated note, here are 5 easy and awesome tips for sound design in Bitwig. If you're newer to Bitwig, one thing you might not be familiar with yet is the idea of the modulators. I think this is one of the most powerful features of Bitwig and is actually a large part of why it became my primary workstation for both my sound design and my music. You can actually add these modulators to any device inside of Bitwig, so I've got the stock EQ5 up here, and we can go down to this little arrow to show the modulators. Here we get 3 plus symbols. Those are the modulators we can add. If we fill those up, we get access to more. So we could go in here and add, let's say, an LFO. We'll click this arrow to set it to target something, and we'll send that to the cutoff frequency of the high pass, and there we go. Or we could do something maybe a bit more exotic, like let's say an audio sidechain. So I want to send the audio sidechain to the gain of band 4, and I want to reduce the gain, and let's say we want that at about 7K. And I want to de-ess a vocal based on if there is a kick drum playing at that time or not. So then I could select my device input. Let's say this is our kick drum here, and now this will de-ess based on the input from another audio source, which is really, really powerful. As you can probably imagine, that on its own is a lot of fun and a lot of power, but the really cool thing is that these modulators can be applied to literally anything in Bitwig. Here I've got an instance of Dune 3, and I've got a pad sound that I made. Cool, and let's say I wanted to do something in Dune 3 using an XY controller. So Dune doesn't have one, so big sad face, but Bitwig does. If we pop into the modulators here, I've got an XY controller here, and I mapped this to Dune 3 by wiggling a parameter, so oscillator 1, and then I grabbed the X controller and tied that to oscillator 1 by just increasing the amount here, and I did the same with the Y controller, so I just moved the level of oscillator 2. Now we've got oscillator 2, here's the target, click on Y, map it to that by clicking and dragging it up. Now I've got a fully functional XY controller to control Dune 3. If I give this a play again, we should see this in action, and you can watch the levels of oscillator 1 and 2 here. So, that's pretty exciting, but we can take this even further. I've added a couple more modulators here, so I've got a random and another random, and what I actually did is target the XY modulator. So I'm modulating the modulators that are modulating Dune. So now I've got a XY pad that's controlling the level of oscillator 1 and 2, but these randoms are then targeting the position of the XY controller. So I don't even have to touch it, and this pad is going to grow and evolve on its own. Now let's take that up one more notch here with another modulator. So I've got a math here, and I've activated this. I sent the randoms to the adds, so these are the 2 inputs. So random 1 is the first, random 2 is the second. Then I've targeted this math operator to the cutoff of the filter. So it's gonna add those 2 signals together and then move the filter around. So now I've got modulators modulating the modulation and then creating new modulation with those modulators to modulate a thing. I guess. I don't know. It's a lot of modulation. You get the idea. It sounds like this. And again, I'm not touching anything right now in Dune. I'm just playing. That is really cool. This, above all else, is one of the features of Bitwig I highly recommend you get familiar with, because there are so many different modulators that can breathe a whole lot of new life into your favorite plugins and synths. Anything that can be automated can be targeted with these, and that opens up a wild new frontier of possibilities for just about anything. An awesome device you should know about in Bitwig is the Multiband Effects 3. This allows you to take any effect you want and make it multiband. This is another really cool trick in Bitwig that I think is sorely underutilized, because people tend to maybe think that this is only for Bitwig devices. And you can do that. We could go in here and find a Bitwig device, like let's say the Blur and add that to only the high end of this guitar sound. Now that's really cool, but the more interesting idea is that if you take a closer look when we open up the available inserts, this is any plugin that I have. So I can take any plugin I want and turn it into a multi-band version. Let's do something a bit more unusual here. I'm gonna open up a couple different instances of Convology XT, which is a free impulse response loader or convolution reverb. So we'll add one for the low, one for the mid, and one for the high. Now, normally this would be restricted to just loading one impulse response for the entire sound, but we can split this up and create something entirely new. Here in the file browser, I'm gonna select some different impulses. I'm gonna put a 808 sound here on the high band. I'm gonna use a kick on the low band, and on the mid band, let's maybe use a cowbell. So I've got 3 different impulse responses splitting this up, and let's just adjust our cutoff points, maybe something like that. And let's see what we get. Bitwig Sampler can not only be a regular sampler, but it can also be a wavetable synth or a granular synth. So let's go into the sampler here. I've got just the bass drum again. Let's add some key tracking so we could play it like an instrument. And right now it just sounds like a kick drum that's being mapped with the pitch, which is not that exciting. But if we click on this repitch here, we can switch over to cycles mode, which uses the source as a wavetable. So let's play this again. And now you hear it's starting to turn into a more usable instrument sound. Now we'll loop in ping pong mode. So let's grab those flags again, set it to about that same area. And now we should get a playable instrument. This is maybe not a great example, so let's pitch this up about an octave or so, and it should sound a bit more pleasing. Maybe we'll add a bandpass filter, adjust the formants, maybe the playback speed, and now we've got kind of a clean sine-ish tone. Let's maybe low pass that, and it could be kind of a cool pad. Neat. The other mode inside of the sampler is textures, which offers granular playback. So let's do this same kind of thing here. So now I've got a vocal one shot. Let's just set the region and we'll just play this back. And that sounds a little weird. Let's go ahead and set a loop, something about the same. And we can start playing with the grain, motion, and speed. Another cool idea is to add more voices here. So we've got voice stacking up here in this left-hand inspector view, I guess is what this is called. We'll increase the voice stacking here. Let's maybe go for like 3. We'll go to the voice stack spread, click that, and add that to the playhead. So now these voices are gonna be at different points in the sample. And now we've created a pretty cool, dense, granular pad that we could throw a reverb on and get something out of. One of the more unique ideas in Bitwig that I haven't seen too much elsewhere is the ability to insert stuff into a delay or reverb feedback path. If you don't understand what that means, basically when you have a delay, a sound goes in and then it loops back through and gets quieter and quieter and quieter, and that's how a delay works. But through this loop or the feedback path, we could add different things like a bit crusher or a filter or a saturator or a reverb or another delay and create something a bit more complicated than just a standard digital echo. Here I've got a standard Bitwig delay with a piano running into it. Let's just hit a note and listen to the standard sound. Standard digital delay, nothing too fascinating, but we can click on this feedback effects part here and start adding in different plugins into their feedback path. And this can be, again, any plugin that you have. Let's do something simple like adding a bit crusher into the feedback path. So now these feedback taps are going to start to get more and more bit crushed. Let's maybe reduce that and mess with the settings a little bit, maybe even make it a little more extreme and ridiculous. So we get these really crunchy delay taps, but we could start chaining things together. So we could add in, let's say, a chorus. Let's add in a reverb or something, because why not? And see what we get now. And we could even go in here and start adding a multi-band effects and do a delay that has a band split effects path in it, because that's what's so sick about Bitwig. This is fun enough on its own with the delay 1, but one of the cooler ideas is to use delay 4, which is 4 individual delays, and we can have 4 different feedback effects paths. So we could add different effects chains to each of these feedback paths and make something totally wild and ridiculous. This, in a musical context, can sometimes work just to create a more interesting delay sound, but this starts to get more into the experimental sound design territory, where you might just send through a single short one-shot through a really complicated multi-tap delay with ridiculous feedback path processing and get something totally insane out the other end. Bitwig's reverb also offers the same feature. So this is using the tank effects. This would be the feedback path of the reverb. Let's add a little bit of decay time here, maybe about 6 seconds, and see what the reverb sounds like. Not that interesting of a reverb, maybe a bit on the metallic side, but let's go in and add a pitch shifter device. Now we can actually make this into a shimmer reverb. Let's just add a short grain and we'll mix this in about 50% so it's not too shimmery and see what we get. Mix that in more. And let's filter that off so the shimmering isn't so ridiculously squeaky. Maybe starting at around 3K or so. One really cool feature in Bitwig is the ability to really quickly stack and layer samples and stuff together inside of the sampler device. So let's grab a guitar here, drag that bad boy on in, and we'll click on the sampler and use Control-G or Command-G to group that together. We'll do Control-D or Command-D to duplicate. Now let's go on that second layer and add in the sound of a wine glass playing. Now we've got these two things stacked together to create a more complex and interesting sound. Within this, we can also do some more interesting routing and effects and stuff. So on this droning thing, let's drop the level a bit. And maybe we could add just a little tiny bit of reverb to that one. Something about like so. And then let's say on the guitar, we want to add just a bit of delay. So this is only affecting this guitar layer. It's not going to touch the drone. The drone has a reverb, the guitar has a delay, and then after all of this, let's add, I guess, a bit of sketch cassette, because sketch cassette makes everything better. Bitwig just recently added in a vocoder as part of a free Christmas update last year, and this goes way beyond just doing traditional vocoder stuff, which we've all heard, and there's nothing wrong with it, it's just maybe not all that exciting anymore. One of the really cool things with the vocoder in Bitwig is we can use this to create new sounds by messing with the carrier and the modulator directly within the device. Bitwig's vocoder has a ton of different options, from the range it's treating to the number of bands to making it mono or stereo to controlling the band pass filter slope to the band width, the attack and release. You can freeze it, you can do all this cool stuff. We've got format control and brightness and basically everything else you need to really dial in a vocoder to create something new. So to demonstrate this really quickly, I've got just a drum loop here in the sampler, which is not that exciting. And I've got the vocoder here, and the carrier by default is some brown noise. That takes that sound and turns it into this. So if we start messing with the bands, I can create a hi-hat loop out of that. Let's mess with the slope and bandwidth. By default, this is actually a grid device, so we could go in here and build a ridiculous one-of-a-kind carrier for our sounds as well, because the grid is just a whole other thing, but that's something that's going to be in an entirely different video because it's way too much to cover here. So let's take this idea and quickly make a really cool pad sound using some nature recordings, shall we? To demonstrate something a bit more interesting with the vocoder here, I've got the sound of some birds at a campfire. It sounds like this. And we're using that as the modulator from the sampler device. Within the carrier section, I've placed an instance of surge. This is just a saw wave with a filter and some movement on the envelope. That goes into a reverb here. That is then fed into a big limiter with a fast attack and release that's crushing it really hard, and then some tape for a bit of wobbly goodness. Let's see what this can turn the sound into. So one final tip before you run off on your Bitwig sound design adventures. I wanted to show you how to bounce out your samples effectively. So let's say this is the final sound here. We'll trim this guy up. I'm just gonna hold shift and trim that to where I feel is right. We'll add a fade out there on the end. Now we'll click on that and add a name to the clip. So I'll call this cool bird pad E minor, sick. And we can click on this clip and we'll use Control Shift B. That's gonna pull up the bounce menu so we can set our sample bit depth and everything here. Let's go to post fader in case there's any effects on that. We'll set this to 24-bit, usually is what you want to do. We don't need to apply any dithering or export in real time typically. So now we'll hit OK, and it's going to bounce that out to our new track. Once you've bounced your stuff out and saved your project, you can actually just go to that directory on your computer, and within there you'll find your Bitwig project and a folder called Bounce. And if we click on that folder, we'll see that we've got our bounce in here. So this is cool bird pad E minor bounce 3, and I can see that that is here. So now if we click and play that, we've got our final sample exported from Bitwig ready to go. And so I think that brings us to the end of this video. So hopefully this inspires you to get out there and go make something awesome. And if you make something using these tips, feel free to share it with me on social media because I'm always really excited to see what you guys are out there creating. So I think that wraps everything up for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I hope you learned something. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.